Being told I wasn't invited to a family vacation would have been painful enough. But being told by my own sister, in front of everyone, that I was never even considered, that was a different kind of sting. And the way she said it, with that cold, perfect smile, made it clear she wanted it to hurt. My name is Maren Thorne, 28 years old. My sister, Briar, is 32 and married to Corbin. They hosted Thanksgiving that year, which meant everything was arranged the Briar way. Polished, controlled, and centered on her. Dinner went smoothly, at least on the surface. We laughed, we ate, we pretended to be a normal family. Then, during dessert, Briar stood up with the confidence of someone who loves attention. She announced a big Christmas surprise for our parents, a 2-week luxury trip to Hawaii. Mom gasped happily, Dad smiled, and everyone clapped. For a moment, even I felt genuinely happy for them. Then Dad asked the question that cracked everything open. So Maren's flight is on the same day? The room fell into instant silence. Briar turned toward me slowly, like she'd been waiting for that exact moment. Her smile tightened, her eyes gleaming with something sharp. She said very casually, "Oh, you're not coming to Hawaii for Christmas. It's just for immediate family." Immediate family. As if I wasn't their daughter. As if I was some distant relative they barely remembered. Her words hit me so hard I actually felt dizzy. Heat rose up my neck, and humiliation washed over me as everyone stared. I didn't plan what happened next. My body reacted before my mind did. My foot shot out under the table and slammed into her shin. Hard. Briar yelped, grabbing her leg. Corbin jumped up. Mom scolded me, and Dad demanded I explain myself. But how could I? I was too stunned, too hurt, too angry. My sister had excluded me in the cruelest way possible, and she'd done it publicly, like it was entertainment. Within minutes, I was being asked to leave the house. I walked out with my pride in pieces, feeling small and unwanted. But even as I drove away, something in me kept whispering that Briar's cruelty wasn't random. There was something behind it, something deeper. I didn't know it yet, but the real betrayal was buried in the past, waiting for me to uncover it. And once I did, everything that happened at that Thanksgiving dinner would suddenly make a lot more sense. The weeks after Thanksgiving felt cold in more ways than one. My parents, Marlon and Diane, didn't yell at me or punish me for what happened, but the air between us was stiff and uncomfortable. Every time we talked, they tried to smooth things over. They kept repeating the same weak lines, as if saying them enough times would make them true. Briar and Corbin are paying. It's their gift, maybe next year. I listened, but none of it made sense to me. Their words didn't fix the embarrassment I felt. They didn't change the sting of being pushed aside like I didn't belong. I tried to move on, but the hurt stayed with me everywhere I went. I kept replaying Briar's cold smile, the way everyone looked at me, the silence in that moment. I thought that was the worst part, until my phone rang one evening and I saw my Aunt Zelda's name on the screen. She was never serious. She loved gossip, jokes, and long stories. So when I answered and heard her tight, angry voice, my stomach dropped. "I heard what happened," she said. "But that's not even the part that makes me angry. There's something you don't know. It's about your college fund." My heart started pounding. I didn't understand what she meant at first. The fund was something my grandmother had talked about when I was younger. She always said she wanted me to have a strong start, something that was mine. I thought the money had just disappeared because of life, bills, or maybe bad planning. I never questioned it deeply. Then Zelda told me the truth, and it felt like the floor fell away under me. The $40,000 my grandmother left for me wasn't gone by accident. Years ago, my parents had taken it. Not for emergencies, not for something we all needed, but for Briar. They used my money to pay for her wedding and help her buy a house. They promised they would pay it back. They never did. I didn't say anything for a long moment. My throat felt tight. Zelda kept talking, her voice shaking. She told me Briar knew about it the whole time. She knew the money wasn't hers. She knew it belonged to me, and she still let my parents spend it on her. And while I struggled through school and worked part-time jobs, she lived comfortably, never mentioning the truth. The betrayal hit deeper than I expected. My chest felt heavy, and my hands shook. It wasn't just the Hawaii trip anymore. It wasn't even the kick under the table or the cold smile she gave me. This was years of selfishness and silence. Years of watching me work for things that were supposed to be mine already. I ended the call with Zelda, but I couldn't calm down. That night, I sat on my bed in the dark, realizing something important. Briar didn't exclude me out of nowhere. She had been taking things from me long before that Christmas trip. And now, for the first time in my life, I finally saw who she really was. After learning the truth about my college fund, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, but it hardened into a quiet, steady anger. I didn't shout, and I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I needed to see everything with my own eyes. I needed proof. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. So I started digging into the past. My mom had always used the same password for almost everything. It wasn't hard to guess, and once I logged into her email and bank accounts, the pieces began falling into place. I scrolled through old statements and saw the transfer immediately. My stomach tightened when I recognized the exact amount my aunt had mentioned. I clicked through years-old emails between my parents. There were promises, excuses, and repeated plans to repay it soon. But nothing ever happened. The money was gone, and no one had tried to give it back. Reading their messages felt like peeling back layers of a story I was never meant to see. I wasn't angry at the numbers on the screen. I was angry at how easily they had pushed me aside. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something they forgot. It was a choice they made and then hid. A day later, my Aunt Zelda dropped off a small box filled with my grandmother's papers. She said Grandma had kept a lot of personal letters, and that she thought I should have them. I waited until I was alone to open the box. Inside were photographs, old receipts, and envelopes tied with ribbon. But what caught my eye was one letter with my name written in Grandma's handwriting. My breath caught as I unfolded it. The ink was slightly faded, but her words were clear. She wrote about the money she left for me and why she had done it. She said she wanted me to have something of my own, something no one could take or control. She called it my escape fund, a way to build a life on my own terms. And then she wrote something that made my chest ache. She worried that my family often followed the loudest voice. I didn't need to guess who that meant. Briar. My grandmother had seen it years before I ever understood it myself. Near the end of the letter, she wrote, "Don't let them make you small, my sweet girl." Those words broke me. I hadn't cried in weeks, not even after Thanksgiving, but now the tears wouldn't stop. I held the letter against my chest and sobbed until my head hurt. I cried for the money I never got, for the dreams I had postponed, and for the truth that had been hidden from me for so long. As I sat there with Grandma's letter in my hands, everything became painfully clear. This wasn't just about being left out of a trip. It wasn't about one cruel moment at a dinner table. It was about years of being pushed aside, ignored, and treated as if I mattered less. This wasn't new. It was a pattern. And for the first time, I finally saw it for what it truly was. In the days after I uncovered the truth about my college fund, I felt as if I was walking around with a heavy stone in my chest. I tried to stay quiet, keep to myself, and let my emotions settle, but everywhere I turned, I was reminded of how different my life looked compared to Briar's. It wasn't just the money. It was the image she had carefully built over the years, an image that made me feel smaller every time someone mentioned her name. Even though I wasn't active on social media, I still heard everything through people we both knew. They always spoke about her with admiration, as if she were something rare and flawless. Briar just got featured in a magazine. Did you see her new project? Her home looks like it belongs in a movie set. Every comment felt like another reminder of how perfectly her life was arranged. Her interior design business, Haven by Briar, had become a local favorite. People praised her style, her confidence, her taste. The magazine feature was just another step in her rising reputation. Everyone seemed to believe her life was effortless, like she floated through the world untouched by stress or struggle. And she made sure it looked that way. She and Corbin fit the same pattern. They were known as the golden couple, attractive, successful, polished. He worked in real estate, and together they presented a picture-perfect life. Expensive vacations, designer furniture, matching outfits for holiday cards. Everything was coordinated down to the smallest detail, as if they were stars in their own show. But the more I learned, the clearer it became that nothing about their life was truly natural. It was all display, a performance, a carefully arranged stage where every prop, every angle, every smile was selected to impress others. It wasn't just about being happy, it was about being admired. And in that polished story, there was no place for me unless I served a purpose. Slowly, I began to see what that purpose was. I had always been the one with the part-time jobs, the simple clothes, the struggles I tried to hide. I was the one living in a small apartment while she lived in a beautifully decorated home. I was the one trying to save money while she posted about brunches and vacations. I was the quiet one who faded into the background while she stood confidently in the center of every room. In her world, I wasn't meant to shine. I was meant to be a shadow. The messy sister. The one who didn't have it all together. The one who made her look even more perfect by comparison. The realization hurt. It showed me that my exclusion from the Hawaii trip wasn't just carelessness or a moment of cruelty. It was part of a bigger pattern, one where I was always kept a step behind so she could stay in the spotlight. Seeing the truth laid out like that made something inside me shift. I wasn't angry in a loud or wild way. It was a quiet, steady feeling. A certainty that things couldn't continue like this. The more I understood Briar's perfect image, the more I saw how I fit into it, and how much I needed to step out of the role she had forced on me. After seeing how perfectly Briar had shaped her world, something inside me finally settled. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped hoping for apologies. Instead, a calm, steady idea began forming in my mind. It wasn't loud or angry. It didn't push me to shout or confront her. It pushed me to think. If she had spent years crafting her perfect image, then that image had weak points. And if she had built a life where everything looked flawless, then those flawless parts could be shaken. I didn't want to hurt her physically or get into messy arguments. I didn't want scenes or drama. What I wanted was balance, an answer to everything she had done quietly over time. So I made a decision. Revenge would not come from noise. It would come from precision. Her life stood on three main strengths: her reputation, her marriage, and her money. If even one of those pillars cracked, the rest would wobble. If all three faltered, her whole picture-perfect world would shift. I knew I couldn't rush anything. I had to be patient, careful, almost invisible. The first thing I did was change the way I behaved around her. I didn't avoid her or act angry. I did the opposite. I became calm, gentle, even warm. When my parents brought up Hawaii again, I told them I had been emotional and that I understood the situation. I said it wasn't a big deal. They seemed relieved, and that worked in my favor. Then I reached out to Briar. I texted her a short congratulations message about her magazine feature. I complimented the photos and pretended to be proud of her. The sweetness felt strange, but it kept her comfortable. If she didn't feel threatened, she wouldn't see me coming. At the same time, I slowly pulled myself back from the family. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I simply became a ghost, present enough to appear normal, distant enough that no one questioned my quiet movements. I listened more than I spoke. I learned things without asking. While all this was happening, I changed my lifestyle. I took a second job, telling everyone I just wanted extra savings. No one questioned it. The extra income became the foundation I needed. Every dollar had a purpose. I cooked at home, skipped outings, and saved everything I could. I felt a sense of control that I hadn't felt in years. And then, without drawing attention, I began stepping into design circles. I didn't pretend to be a designer. I just showed up at small events and workshops and introduced myself casually. I asked questions, watched people, and made soft connections. I learned the language of the industry and kept my eyes open for anything that might help me later. Every move I made was small, quiet, and careful. No shouting. No anger. No warnings. Just the slow, steady planting of seeds that would grow into something much larger. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't desperate. I was preparing. And the best part was that no one, not even Briar, suspected a thing. Once I had my plan in motion, I waited for the right moment to strike the first part of Briar's perfect world. I didn't want to guess or assume anything. I needed proof, something solid that could not be ignored or explained away. So I kept watching, listening, and learning quietly, just as I had planned. It didn't take long before I noticed a pattern in the way Briar talked about her work. She often bragged about her unique style and how clients trusted her creativity more than anyone else's. But some of the things she mentioned sounded oddly familiar. I had seen similar designs during the time I spent attending small design meetups and browsing through different portfolios. One day, curiosity pushed me to look deeper. I opened her business website and compared her recent project for the Westerly Hotel with some of the Scandinavian designers I had discovered at the meetups. The similarities were not small, they were nearly identical. Colors, layouts, shapes, even the smallest details looked copied. My heart pounded as I kept comparing page after page. It was obvious. She hadn't created those ideas. She had taken them. I didn't get excited or angry. I just felt a quiet certainty settle inside me. This was the opening I needed. I spent days gathering everything. I took screenshots of the original designs and placed them next to Breyer's work. I added the links to the Scandinavian designers' websites. I wrote short notes explaining each match. I didn't exaggerate anything. I didn't twist the truth. I simply laid the facts out clearly so anyone reading would understand exactly what she had done. When the dossier was complete, I printed it and placed everything neatly in a brown envelope. I didn't send it from my city. I drove 2 hours away, walked into a small post office, and mailed copies to 2 places: the hotel's corporate office and the magazine that had featured her. I didn't include my name or any clue about who I was. It was important that the truth speak for itself. After that, I waited. I didn't ask questions. I didn't watch her social media. I didn't mention anything to anyone. I just continued living my life quietly, as if nothing had changed. About a month later, the first signs of trouble reached me through family whispers. The Westerly Hotel had paused her project for a review. The magazine that loved her so much quietly corrected their article and removed her spread. People in her circle started to talk. Nothing loud, just small comments, unsure questions, little doubts. But those little doubts were enough to shake her. She suddenly looked stressed, like she was always in a rush. She snapped at people and blamed copycats and jealous competitors, trying to convince everyone that she was the victim. But the damage had already begun. The shine around her reputation dimmed, even if only slightly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. The first pillar of her perfect world had finally started to fall. I realized that after shaking Breyer's reputation, the next step had to target her marriage. Corbin was the key, and if I could make even a small crack there, it would weaken the foundation of her perfect life. I needed to be subtle, careful, and calm. There was no need for anger or confrontation, just small, precise moves that would make her question everything. The opportunity came during a rare family barbecue. Most of the relatives were busy, leaving a small window where I could speak to Corbin alone. I approached him quietly, putting on the role of the caring, concerned sister. I started by talking about Breyer's stress at work, how she always pretended everything was fine, but I had noticed her struggling. I told him softly, "She seems worried sometimes. I think she's not sure you two are on the same page about the future." It was a lie, of course, but it wasn't meant to be shocking. I didn't need him to confront her or argue with me. I just planted a tiny seed, a thought that could grow into doubt in Corbin's mind. Once the seed was in place, I stepped back and let it settle. A few days later, I created another opportunity to stir the waters. Mom had been struggling with her printer, so I offered to help. While fixing it, I forwarded an old, harmless email from my college days that had a flirty tone. I made a small change to the preview line so it looked like it was from a female colleague, not the original friend. Then I made sure it appeared on Breyer's laptop screen. I acted clumsy and apologetic, pretending it had been an accident. I didn't need the email to prove anything. I didn't need Corbin to react immediately. All I needed was to introduce a tiny uncertainty into her mind, a quiet thought that would make her question things she had always taken for granted. Doubt, once it starts, grows on its own. It doesn't need me to push it. From that moment, I noticed small changes. Breyer began checking Corbin's messages more often, questioning minor things, and reading too much into casual comments. She didn't realize where the feelings of unease had started. I kept my distance, acting as though nothing had happened, smiling when I saw them together, and congratulating her when she shared small successes. It was fascinating to watch how quickly the mind can create tension from tiny seeds. What I had done was subtle and almost invisible, but it worked. Breyer began to feel a tension in her marriage she couldn't explain. I hadn't touched her finances yet, or her reputation directly, but the cracks in her perfect world were becoming more visible. By the time Christmas arrived, her confidence had already begun to wobble. The house of perfection she had built so carefully was starting to tremble, and I knew I had set the next stage of my plan into motion. By now, I had shaken Breyer's reputation and created doubt in her marriage, but the final pillar of her perfect life, money, remained untouched. That was where my grandmother's college fund became my leverage. It was mine, taken from me years ago, and now it was time to use it carefully. I contacted a lawyer, Ms. Vance, a professional I could trust to handle things with calm precision. Together, we prepared a formal letter to my parents and Breyer. It wasn't aggressive or threatening. It didn't demand lawsuits or public exposure. Instead, it laid out the facts clearly. The $40,000 my grandmother had left for me, the way it was used for Briar's wedding and house down payment, and the promises my parents had made but never kept. The letter also explained the legal principle of fiduciary duty and the consequences of misappropriating funds. But it emphasized that I wanted a private, familial resolution without going to court. When the letter was delivered, the reaction was immediate. I could feel it without being there, through phone calls, texts, and my Aunt Zelda's updates. My parents were panicked. They suddenly realized this was serious, and that hiding the truth wouldn't work anymore. Their calm, rational facade crumbled, replaced by fear. They began pointing fingers at Briar, saying she had benefited most from the money and needed to help fix the situation. Briar's face, which had always been perfect and controlled, showed cracks for the first time. Corbin looked confused and frustrated, caught between his wife's defensiveness and the seriousness of the claim. Small arguments became loud fights. They shouted over each other, trying to justify their actions and blame someone else. My parents jumped in, blaming Briar, and she shot back. The family I had grown up with, which had once seemed so united, fell into chaos. It was a strange feeling to watch. I wasn't gloating or celebrating. I just observed quietly as the consequences of years of secrecy and favoritism finally surfaced. The couple who had always seemed untouchable were now struggling to maintain control. Decisions about selling assets, transferring money, and repaying debts became urgent topics. Every late night, every tense phone call, every whispered argument reminded me that my quiet, patient plan was working. I didn't need to push. I didn't need to yell or argue. The letter did the work for me. My parents, terrified of scandal, forced Briar to act. Corbin and Briar argued constantly, the cracks in their life widening, and my $40,000, which had been stolen from me, became the key to their sudden panic. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control. The balance had shifted. The pillars Briar had built so carefully, her reputation, her marriage, her financial comfort, were all trembling. And I had orchestrated it quietly, carefully, without anyone realizing it was coming. The final stage of my plan was underway, and the consequences of their past actions were unfolding exactly as they should. While my family was supposedly enjoying Hawaii, I spent Christmas quietly at home. There were no fancy beaches, no loud parties, no forced smiles, just calm, warmth, and a sense of relief. I didn't need a vacation to feel happy. The peace of having my own space, away from their chaos, was more satisfying than any tropical view. But my phone didn't stay quiet for long. Zelda, who had stayed behind, kept me updated on what was happening with the family. Each message made me blink in disbelief. The luxurious holiday they had posted about on social media was a complete lie. Behind the perfect photos and cheerful captions, their trip had become a tense battlefield. My parents were icy with one another, their polite smiles replaced by constant bickering. Every conversation with Briar seemed to end in sharp words or silent resentment. The issues my lawyer had brought up about the stolen college fund had created an invisible weight that neither Briar nor my parents could escape. My parents had always seemed to support her, but now they were angry, frustrated, and desperate to fix what had spiraled out of control. Briar and Corbin, the couple who had always appeared inseparable and happy, were barely speaking. The doubts I had planted earlier, the small seeds of uncertainty, had grown quietly. Now they shadowed every interaction between them. A word spoken the wrong way, a glance interpreted as suspicion, a small silence. Each became fuel for more tension. The paradise they had promised themselves had turned into a cage, with no one able to enjoy the beauty around them. Photos still made it online, the bright beaches and luxury resorts looking like everything was perfect. But the reality was completely different. Every picture hid the arguments, the silent treatments, the paranoia. Their smiles were masks hiding stress and resentment. The family vacation meant to exclude me, the one meant to showcase Briar's perfect life, had instead become a pressure cooker. The more I read Zelda's updates, the more I realized that my absence had changed everything. The tension, the cracks, the fights, they all pointed back to the plan I had set in motion. What had begun as a personal betrayal at Thanksgiving had grown into a ripple that now shook every part of their so-called perfect life. For the first time, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I wasn't in Hawaii, I didn't have fancy photos, and I didn't need to prove anything. The holiday they had wanted to enjoy without me had turned into chaos, and I watched it unfold from a place of calm, knowing that their own actions had brought them there. By the time New Year arrived, everything had changed. Breyer's carefully built world was crumbling. The Westerly Hotel ended their contract with her, citing breach of originality clauses. Her proud reputation in the design world had suffered a serious blow. Corbin, shaken and frustrated, moved out and filed for separation. The marriage that once seemed unbreakable was now over. Meanwhile, the legal pressure I applied with Ms. Vance finally forced a resolution. My parents' house was refinanced, and Breyer had to sell her prized vintage car to repay the $40,000 she had taken from me, with interest. The money I had been denied for so long was finally returned. When I deposited the check into a new account, it wasn't just a sum of money. It was a symbol of all the control I had been denied, now reclaimed. I sent one final group message to my family. The debt is paid. Do not contact me again. It was calm, quiet, and final. I didn't need to shout or make a scene. Everything had been resolved, and my absence itself carried weight. I had removed myself from the chaos and from the people who had tried to erase me, taking back the power they had taken for granted. After years of watching others live comfortably while I struggled, I finally had a sense of freedom. The money became my escape fund, just as my grandmother had intended. I moved to a new city, renting a small apartment that felt like my own world, a place where I could breathe and plan my life without interference. The past was no longer hanging over me. Every dollar, every decision, every quiet step I had taken over the last months had led me here. The revenge I carried out wasn't loud. It wasn't about public humiliation or dramatic confrontations. It was precise, careful, and deliberate. It was about reclaiming control, restoring fairness, and making sure those who had tried to hold me back could no longer dictate my life. The kick under the table at Thanksgiving had been a reflex, born of shock and hurt. But what followed was measured, patient, and intentional. It was the sound of someone taking back what was rightfully theirs, quietly but completely. I hadn't needed to shout, argue, or beg. I had acted, and the results spoke for themselves. That new year, I felt a deep, quiet victory. I had left behind betrayal, exclusion, and lies. I had stepped into a life that was mine, fully and finally, with no one able to stop me. My past had tried to hold me down, but I had risen above it, calm, deliberate, and free.